the world tree near the village, so the villagers and he went into the cave where those roots connected. There they found a huge glowing crack filled with an unknown red light, and something unknown came out of it. By the time he arrived, everyone else had already been wiped out. He still doesn't know why he wasn't infected. Maybe because he's an elf, but in the end he was spared on one condition. As long as the creature could feed on the villagers' life force, he could keep treating them. So the woman made a deal with him. He would keep people alive while she drained them. And for the sake of the village, he kept working hard to create more life force. Back in the crypt, Kivye asks why he said nothing when they first arrived. They could have learned the truth left and told the king directly. He says many people came before them, but once they learned the truth, trying to leave the forest only got them infected. Most of the time it was all just a test of his loyalty. Because every time he told someone, the bloodsucker killed the people he told, and he's sure they know by now. Because even the monsters around the village were infected, that's why so many were chasing them on the way in. When the elf noticed a new group had arrived, he let them in, hoping this time things might turn out differently. He gets emotional and says it's been a long time since he talked to someone still in their right mind. Kivye realizes the monster that came through the dimensional crack matches most of what she had predicted. So her guess was right. That also explains what happened to Rondel and the others. The elf then tells them where they are now. At the house by the base of the tree, the woman is feeding the main boy herself. Then she asks what he thinks of it. He says it tastes amazing, which makes her beam with joy. She turns to Rondel and asks why he isn't eating, especially after sleeping for 2 whole days. Rondel snaps, saying he knows her trick. She's trying to fool him, fatten him up and eat him later. Right away someone reaches for a knife nearby. The boy calls Rondel unbelievably rude. He can't believe Rondel would talk to their mother like that in front of their father and asks if he's lost his mind. Rondel thinks the one who's really lost it is Volterra. But the woman just says he shouldn't be so harsh. Since Rondel is a half-elf, it takes him longer to become part of the family. That's when Rondel figures it out. Being a half-elf slows the mental control, but it can still happen. He thinks the only one who might save him is Volterra himself. If he can hold out long enough, then Afa walks in with a plate. He says this is a special meal made just for the young master. The food looks completely messed up, basically guts and blood. Rondel gulps. Afa immediately calls for the cook. The cook is Hades, and Afa demands to know what he thought he was making. Hades nervously says he only cooked the pig the master asked for, but Afa pushes him harder. Still apologizing, Hades wonders if maybe the young master simply wanted something else. The boy gets annoyed and says even 1 drop of Hellhound ketchup would have been enough to satisfy him. They keep pressuring Hades and all he can do is beg for forgiveness. By this point, Rondel can't make sense of any of it. Then Madame steps in and says that's enough. She wants this house to stay happy. She adds that if Rondel refuses to eat, he'll die of hunger. And if her son dies, his mother will be heartbroken. But forcing a child to eat would make her a bad mother. So how are they supposed to fix this? Hades slowly raises his hand. He says the awful food was his fault. Madame reaches out at once and fires him on the spot. So Rondel finally eats. And once he does, he tells himself to just pretend it's pork. It's actually good somehow. Still, all he's really thinking about is how to escape this village. Then someone appears at the door and asks to come in. The woman says she was just thinking she needed a few more helpers. Rondel looks over and sees the other elves say he brought the maid she requested. Kivye is introduced as the one who will be serving them now. It's explained that Kivye, the goddess of darkness, was sealed away by the 4 heroes blessed by the goddesses. Then about 6 months ago, an unknown dimensional gap was found while her powers were still sealed. That much was expected, but the demon god's corruption is spreading too fast, so her mission can't wait any longer. The elf says Kivye's companions were only stopped for 2 days, and by now the bloodsuckers have probably fully merged with their bodies. Kivye thinks she could remove one before only because it hadn't fully settled in yet. Now pulling them out directly like she did before would be impossible. Back in the present, the elf suggests she tried waking her companions the same way she woke up. Kivye wonders if that would mean burning the bloodsucker with her aura. He explains it would be like forcing your aura into someone else's body, basically poisoning them. They'd need enough strength to endure it. Still, she thinks Volterra could probably handle her aura. The main boy might not be hurt too badly either, but she can't make one careless move. Not while that so-called mother is watching. Still, it seems the woman can't tell for sure whether someone is infected. Rondel asks if his brother isn't infected too. That makes Kivye wonder why his brother is apologizing. Rondell realizes what it means. His brother infected Kivye and left her behind. Madam, meanwhile, admires Kivye, calling her strong and beautiful, like humans were raised with the Creator's love. Even so, she says Kivye is nothing more than a doll now. As she grabs Kivye's cheeks, Rondell snatches the knife and drives it into her hand, leaving a small cut. She only asks if Rondell really disliked her food that much. Rondell says his group did nothing wrong. He's the one who led everyone into the village, so if she wants to do something, she should do it to him. But Kivye grabs his hand and says that in moments like this, all he really needs to do is apologize. That makes him remember those were his own words to her before. He lets go of the knife and says he's sorry. At the same time, in the frozen wasteland, someone is already in the middle of a fight. He's struggling against a monster and says he may have no choice but to use that power. It's Lado. He raises his hand and tries to use mind control, but it doesn't work. The creature looks almost cute. Well, not really. Lado thinks getting captured by the Brotherhood might have been the better outcome. Then he notices a mechanical arm nearby. Someone starts pulling, rushes in and lashes the beast. It's Jong. And he says this place is crawling with high-level monsters. He adds that Ladi's ability won't work on creatures like these, which is actually pretty convenient for Terrakian. But the monster gets back up and Jong laughs, saying maybe this thing isn't on his level either. Lod yells at him to stop laughing because they're about to die, then tells him to let go of the prototype hand. Jong realizes it's stuck. So the two of them work together. When suddenly a pile of boards crashes down, Lod yells wonders if they're still alive and Jong thanks Lionheart for saving them again. Lionheart steps in, looking annoyed that they can't even handle a natural monster. He makes it clear he didn't save them just to hear excuses. The other guy quickly says he'll do better. Lod asks why they're all the way out in this freezing place. Jong guesses it's for leveling up, or maybe a hidden dungeon. But Lionheart asks if they even know why hunters go into dungeons, and Jong jokingly throws out a dumb answer. Lionheart says that's not what he meant. Lod asks if he's really from Earth, since he doesn't even know the difference between a natural monster and a dungeon monster. He explains the beast from before was a natural monster and it attacked because they stepped into its territory. Lionheart adds that natural monsters are like living parts of Ratna. Dungeons on the other hand were made by Ormflus, the demon god. The monsters inside can't eat or drink anything from Ratna, so they can't leave the dungeons, which is why civilians usually aren't in much danger from them. Jong asks that if dungeons aren't the problem, why hunters go into them at all? Lionheart says it's because of greed. Rare items and the fame that comes from clearing a dungeon drive countless people in Ratna to rush straight toward death. He says dungeons are just the first step in the demon god's plan to invade Ratna. Jong asks if that's why Lionheart turned dungeon cores into items, and Lionheart says exactly. Then he asks whether his guide has said anything about this. That's when they spot a crack. It's described as an unstable dimensional rift connected to the abandoned homeland of the gods. Jong immediately asks what that even means. Lionheart says nobody knows. More than 100 of these cracks have been reported across Ratna and they're clearly different from normal dungeons. Still, because his guide was made by Ormflus, he could understand it, so this may be tied to Ormflus himself. Jong leans in toward the crack for a closer look and sees the root of the great tree on the other side. Meanwhile, a man in a wagon is frantically trying to contact someone. A prince answers and complains that the report is late. The man says the prince has been captured and the village is under monster control, but before he can finish, he gets stabbed. The prince is left wondering what just happened. He says something is clearly wrong in the village and since it's close to the Elven Kingdom, they should move to help, but he gets cut off. He's told this incident no longer concerns only the elves. The prince argues that even as the Fairy Alliance is representative, she can't interfere in Elven matters without first bringing it to an alliance meeting. He asks if she plans to meddle in their internal affairs. She calmly says, of course not. Then another man speaks up. He asks if she understands they don't have time to wait for permission at every step, especially when Zenobia said they need to move fast. But Rolian pushes back saying they showed up without warning and have no right to force anything on the kingdom. Then the Elf King arrives and says it's been 15 years since he last saw the Queen. She apologizes for coming so late and without notice and the king says she must have a serious reason. Still, since she came with no formal warning, he assumes she isn't here as the Fairy Alliance's representative, but is one of the 4 heroes. She confirms that and says she can't explain everything. The king already knows the place she wants to visit, a small village where elves aren't welcome, and the residents govern themselves. Even so, they're still part of the Fairy Alliance, so he warns her to be careful and not cause trouble. The prince says she can go, but it would be better to leave tomorrow morning. She thanks them, then leaves the room and speaks with the man beside her. She says the Elf Kingdom is small, even counting the whole Fairy Alliance. Their people and military strength are less than half of other nations. The only reason the Alliance still has any diplomatic weight is Rolian. The prince then says he'll go with Rolian tomorrow. The king answers that he's grown old, and the other noble elves are waiting for the crown to weaken more each day. A king can't move freely. The prince says there must be some kind of mental control involved. Even if it should be impossible, power like that could be gained through the roots of the world tree, and as the king's oldest son in heir, he's the only one who should be able to use those roots. The king asks if he's hesitating to send him somewhere that dangerous. The prince says he just doesn't want to go through hell again. Meanwhile, back in the cell, Rondell tries to pull a brick from the wall. This time, he gets it loose, but when he looks through the gap, he sees the tree. It's impossible to damage. Nothing could scratch it, not even the sharpest axe. Even so, he knows he has to escape and starts wondering what he can do. Then the woman arrives with the others and asks if he's thought about his mistakes. Rondell says yes, still calling her mom. He claims he reflected on everything and regrets the sin he committed, but she notices the brick beside him and asks if he's still thinking about running away. Then she tells everyone else to leave so she can speak with Rondell alone. The others start filing out. Creve glances at Rondell, but she has to keep pretending she's under control too. Rondell is barely holding himself together and Creve thinks there's nothing she can do right now. At least the worst outcome, his death, has been avoided. She can't help thinking none of this would have happened if they had never accepted the Elf King's mission. But even with so much changed, Rondell's death may still be unavoidable. If they force fate to change too much, her vision will break and she'll lose the ability to see the future. For Ratna's future, she has to save Prota first and focus on the goddess's mission, finding the Sword King. So Creve starts heading toward Prota, but a pharaoh stops her and asks what she thinks she's doing. There's still plenty of work to do. Creve realizes this could get bad if she has to fight before freeing Prota from the control. Still, the woman is busy with Rondell, so maybe that gives her enough time to reach Prota. But a pharaoh keeps yelling, saying she's acting strange and asking if she didn't hear her. Just as a pharaoh starts wondering if she should get rid of both of them, someone knocks at the door. Attis checks and finds the doctor there, then asks what he wants. He says he came to see the lady and they keep talking. Then the elf calls a pharaoh and Attis outside. Meanwhile, Creve sees her chance and heads straight for Prota. In his room, he's thinking about how he's always used tiny beds, how tight his clothes feel, and how he almost doesn't feel like himself. Looking at the mustache in the mirror, he tells himself he's obviously not some savage who would walk around without proper clothes. And there's no way his real face would be missing such a fine mustache. But the moment he sees Creve, he swings at her. At the same time, Rondell points the brick at the woman and says she's nothing but a monster. She asks if he truly believes that. Has he ever seen a dungeon monster? If she were one of those, everyone here would already be dead. Dungeon monsters only want destruction. They exist to wipe out everything. That urge is their whole nature, but she says she rejects it, which makes her different. Rondell shouts back that even if that's true, what's the real difference between a monster that controls people and one that kills them? She answers that manipulation isn't so different from what others do either. Just like when he was born and his mother was killed, Rondell freezes in shock and she quickly acts like she shouldn't have said that. He lashes out at her, but she catches his arm with ease. Then she says words won't convince him, so she'll have to place a parasite in him herself. She doesn't want to cut him open to do it, so she tells him to stay still. Right then, the whole place shakes. Rondell immediately thinks Creve must have done something. When the woman looks back, part of the wall has burst open and the mustache goes flying. Creve realizes she was stupid to think she could just burn away the blood inside him with her own strength. Proctor starts walking out, ripping off all his clothes as he goes. Then he says this couldn't be avoided after all. Since the domestic and disciple made sure to tear his clothes, he can now treat her as someone attacking the family. During the shaking, the woman demands to know what's happening outside. But Rondell rushes in front of the bars and says she can't be allowed to reach Creve. He's sure Creve must be fighting the others to save them. Then he watches the woman simply pass through the barrier and he can only think, what can I even do? That's when he notices the hole and wonders if the World Tree's root might help. The scene shifts to Proudest thoughts. He wandered alone for 20 years with nowhere to go, but the villagers took him in. To him, this place became home, his family, and he'll protect them all. Then he attacks Creve. Kivye realizes truth and lies have been mixed together in his head. She yells that those memories were planted and tries to bring him back to his senses while kicking him in the face. Prota says that if she's telling the truth then everyone in the village is wrong, or maybe she's the only one who is. He grabs her leg and throws her far away. She lands, steadies herself, and realizes the only way to save Prota is to make him use his own aura. So she charges him with a burst of aura. It's a powerful attack, but he uses the ground itself to block it. Then Prota rushes in and attacks her directly with his bare hand, sending her spear flying away. Kivye says she expected this. It's impossible to force him to use aura. Prota tells her to stop talking nonsense. But she fires back that he can prove whether it's nonsense himself. By using his aura, or maybe he can't. He admits that's true. Then the woman cuts in saying he can't use aura because the whole village would be destroyed, and asks Prota if that isn't right. He agrees at once, clearly under control. Kivye realizes the woman made sure he wouldn't use aura and demands to know who she is. But the woman stabs into Kivye's shoulder and asks the same thing. Who are you really? She points out that parasites don't work well on children since they don't have many memories. So if Kivye is clearly an adult, how is she still conscious? Kivye answers that despite how she looks, she's only been alive for 4 weeks. The woman laughs it off like a joke, then says maybe appearances really can be misleading. But Kivye's presence is still pushing that boy forward. Even so, she chose Prota over the boy and asks if that doesn't make her feel sorry for him. Kivye only replies that the woman is just a monster. Meanwhile, Rondell is opening a hole in the wall. The woman says that if that's how Kivye sees it, then she can die for that monster. But suddenly Rondell touches the world tree and a violent shock runs through it. The woman immediately demands to know who dared interfere with her signal and asks if it was Rondell. At that moment, Kivye jumps on Prota and out of nowhere she kisses him. It completely catches him off guard. He can only stare in shock. The woman kicks Kivye away and asks if that was really her last move. She says pouring aura into him is useless now because the parasite is already fully linked to his body. No one would ever doubt the life she gave them because she rewrote their memories with Happy One so nothing ever felt strange. But then a hand suddenly reaches out and she asks how he woke up on his own. She screams that the memories were supposed to be perfect. Prota 2 says she's right. She really did give him a home, a wife and a child to protect. It was the life he truly wanted. But there was one thing that felt deeply wrong. He had no memory of ever kissing anyone in his life. The woman starts screaming and aura bursts out through her throat until she explodes, leaving nothing behind. Kivye says it was just mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and Prota 2 yells back that he knows. Later back at the house he looks at Kivye and says that her mouth-to-mouth snap brought him back to his senses. So he thanks her. She asks if he's seriously thinking about that and tells him to stay focused. The main body might be active again and this was the one way to wake him up that she never wanted to use. He apologizes saying she's the one who forced the kiss. Kivye shoots back asking if he was planning to try that with a tease too. He quickly says no. Something like that shouldn't work at all. It only worked on him because it broke through a memory gap caused by something that never happened. Then Kivye suddenly notices something. Rondell is trapped in the tree. He says she's still alive. Ryu tears open the bars with his bare hand. Then she moves in and slices through all the vines holding Rondell. As he falls, Rondell says he's happy. After that they figure out what's been going on. The roots of the world tree send out signals that control people. Infected humans receive those signals and the monster twists them. It was basically using the world tree roots like mind control Wi-Fi, which means the main body is somewhere underground among the roots. So the only way to stop the mind control is to kill the monster's main body and restore the world tree. Once that happens everyone should be free from the infection. After that they'll recover on their own. But Ryu suddenly looks concerned. She asks what's wrong. The protagonist says the mark she drew is getting all the attention. Kivye fires back that it's weird hearing that from someone standing there half naked like a clown. Then Rondell points out one thing they forgot. He has to be the one to restore the world tree. So he needs to go underground too. Only if he reaches the tree down there can he do it. But Kivye cuts in and says Rondell has to stay above ground until the enemy is beaten. Rondell asks why and Kivye explains the underground path is like a maze. Without someone who can sense the world tree they'll never make it through. He also says he can fight the creatures now since he learned the real sword art. But she reminds him after touching the world tree he lost sight in one eye. Then she says she and Ryu should be enough to beat the enemy. In his current condition he can't handle it. MC ignores that, grabs Rondel and lifts him onto the horse. He says the children of Valterra go to battle at 3 years old. That's how they learn to fight. And with Rondel's sense of direction they'll find the way fast. So he calls out Rondel's riders move out. And before anyone can argue they charge off at once. Meanwhile deep underground a T speaks up. He says this place is so deep it feels like a dungeon. When Effie touches one of the roots they see it draining a man's life force. That leaves them wondering what this thing is really doing down here. The doctor explains that the roots are sucking away people's energy and that life force gathers into the great tree's fruits and branches changing them into huge red crystals. She says all of it was made by her. Then she adds that the two of them need to recover Valterra's sword. That blade is what they'll need next. But the woman declares she'll kill them. She accepted him as part of the family. So how dare he steal her son and husband? The elf realizes Kivye managed to save Ryu but it happened too fast. He tries to play dumb and asks what the problem is. She snaps that he knows exactly what the problem is and that woman knew too. He insists he didn't know. She says she's going to kill him. He just answers calmly fine by him. That means they can finally stop pretending this fake happy home was ever real. Because she can't even act like a proper monster without giving in to her urge to kill. And without his magic maybe she'll end up no better than a human. She immediately tries to pull him back in saying he has nowhere else to go after being cast out of the kingdom. She adds that Valterra is loyal to the end and won't leave the village until he saves his friends. He'll come straight through the front. She says she likes brave strong men but he'll still pay. Because he's a traitor who kissed another woman. Then she orders Etz and Effa to kill them. A little later the elf shows up and says he's glad Rondel is safe. Rondel asks if he's hurt. The elf says he was fighting his own companions. The magic swordsman and the wizard and all he could do was try to escape them. He then asks why this guy isn't being controlled. Maybe it's because he's an elf. Kivye says she doesn't know for sure but it seems the world tree signals only affect humans. Thanks to him she was able to get close to him. That's how she managed to reach him at all. The protagonist starts wondering if it only affects humans then why? But the elf cuts in and says that's only natural for the son of the elf king. Even he couldn't reach the world tree. Is sure Rondel can save this kingdom. Then Kivye spots Effa charging in to kill. She blocks the attack at once. Ryu yells for Effa to snap out of it. But Kivye says if that were easy she wouldn't have suffered so much fighting him before. Right now they're enemies and Atis is already casting fire magic. He's building up a huge blast. Ryu doesn't wait. He dives right between them. He can tell Atis is much stronger than before and he shouts for them to think about what they're doing. They're attacking their own friends. Atis answers that there's nothing wrong with fighting invaders in their land. Then he launches another wave of fire. Ryu responds with a classic move. He stomps the ground and the earth breaks apart. Everyone drops and MC jumps into the hole with both of them. He shouts that there has to be some way to bring them back to normal. But when Kivye calls out, she gets hit. The blow lands hard and the woman snarls, asking how Kivye dared show up after ruining her family. Kivye snaps and starts tearing through everything in sight. She launches straight in, striking so hard nothing around them is left untouched. Then she yells for J to take Rondel back to the surface. Rondel protests, saying they need him to break the mind control. Kivye tells him he'll die if he stays there. Shaken, he asks what she means. Before he gets an answer, the other elf grabs him while the two women keep fighting. Rondel thinks he's just a burden, and that running away is the only way he can help Kivye and Valterra. The elf tells him not to be afraid. They're only trying to protect him. But if he really wants to help, then now is the time to prove himself. Back below, Kivye keeps smashing through the woman's attacks. The woman says Kivye knows an elf will die if he stays near the world tree too long. And the longer this goes on, the more everyone else will fall under her control. She adds that Kivye never truly wanted to save that child anyway. Even as the fight keeps breaking apart the area, she keeps taunting her, saying Kivye only wanted the child to die somewhere she wouldn't have to watch. Kivye tells her to shut up and keeps attacking. But the woman goes on, saying all she wants is Valterra. Kivye should leave Rondel behind and walk away. But copies of the old woman keep appearing, filling the area as she keeps ranting. She says she doesn't care about Valterra's friends at all. If she could, she'd kill every one of them. That only makes Kivye angrier, and she starts cutting through all of them. Still, Kivye realizes that even with the artifact, it's not enough. If she switches to aura, it'll work even worse. The woman heals too fast because she keeps absorbing life force from the world tree's roots. To beat all these monsters, they'll need some power other than aura. The woman says Kivye must have figured it out by now. She's weak to every kind of energy except aura. But she isn't afraid of a magic swordsman and a wizard because both are fully under her control. She looms over them with a huge twisted face. Kivye suddenly laughs, then says she gets it now if this is the original form. There's actually a very easy way. She's already found the answer. Then the ground behind her is destroyed. The woman panics, asking what's happening. Ryu throws something to Kivye and when he turns, Ifa is demanding his necklace back. It's the polymorph necklace. The second it activates, both of them turn back into dragons. The moment Ifa changes back, he unleashes a fierce blast. Fire roars out and burns through everything around them. The woman is stunned. A dragon. He was a dragon this whole time. Ifa draws in a huge breath, furious that she tried to make him kill his own companions. He tells her to get ready for her burial. Ryu stares and says this might be the first time he's ever seen Ifa this mad. Then out of nowhere, Ifa swings at him too. The protagonist just taps her on the nose and tells her to get herself together. She blurts out, "Hey, why are you in my mouth?" Then it all comes back to her. Everything she did to Hades. And now Ifa wants to attack her too. MC says waking them up was really hard. But Kivye says waking MC was even harder. He asks where Rondel is. She says he went to the surface with the second prince. Then she adds that since the main body is under constant attack now, it probably can't hurt them anymore. The woman explodes in rage, calling them filthy lizards. Then she sends a pulse of power into the tree. It twists violently, drops to the ground and turns into something huge. Basically a giant body for the woman. Everyone shouts in shock asking what that thing is. The monster has changed again. The woman screams that if they want a monster then she'll show them one. And blasts power at them to shut them up. But Hades spits right in her face, throwing off her attack. He tells her that way of thinking is exactly what makes her a monster. She snaps back, calling him nothing but a loudmouth lizard. Then she moves in to strike Hades. But Ryu cuts in first and tears into her with aura. He slices her arm clean off and says her sword can't even break through his aura. Then he leaps down from a Fura and she's left stunned, not even sure what just happened. Ryu says this is the biggest thing he's seen since Itase and jokes that maybe he should have brought a few more swords. She catches him mid-air but her hand blows apart, sending aura flying everywhere. He just keeps counting his swords. 6, 5, more branches start covering her arm, but he's still smashing through everything and her body keeps shrinking. 4, 3, and now she's in shock wondering why she isn't healing. Ryu keeps going and counts down to 2. Then, just as he's about to say 1, he unleashes a brutal strike and her sword shatters. She's about to scream at him, but Kivye drives a fierce spear straight into her head. Kivye says she's already used too much power, so she's giving the artifact back. Ryu asks if she's only returning it now. Before anything else, the woman screams that the world tree is draining her life force, and the only one who could do that is that elf. The protagonist gets ready to throw his dagger at him, but when he looks deeper into the barrier, Rondel explains what's happening. He says all the world tree's life force is flowing into that opening. He apologizes for not being able to move, but his brother says that's enough. Without that power, the queen can't regenerate, and their allies can finish the job. Rondel says that's a relief, but asks what that opening really is. His brother says he can't be fully sure yet, but that gap is how the bloodsuckers got out of the dungeon. If a strange amount of energy is poured into it, the opening grows. That means the area the bloodsuckers can move through grows too, and if his guess is right, they could spread across the whole land. Rondel says he doesn't understand, but the man keeps going. He says once the gap is fully opened and the queen dies, every human in the Fairy Alliance will fall under his control. At this point, he's completely lost it. Rondel is horrified, and when he tries to close the opening, he gets slapped away. The man asks if Rondel was really trying to shut it. Then he says he spent 20 years studying parasitic bloodsuckers inside humans, and learned they react to signals from the tree of the world. Still, bloodsuckers were just simple creatures that fed on life force. He had some success, but he could never tune them well enough to use in humans. Not only that, the king stripped him of his position because of those experiments. Now he says that if the elves rule over countless humans, they can keep everything calm, just like in the Elven Kingdom. Rondell realizes he kept his research going in this village even after being cast out. The man admits it. He says this village is where he finally completed his experiment, all because he found that monster. That creature could change the bloodsuckers. However he wanted, after he discovered the gap, now all he has to do is wait for the others to kill her. When Ryu forces the creature's mouth open, he sees a body inside. He asks if that's the real body. But the creature tells him not to look. Then she lunges at MC. Kivye grabs her by the neck and says they don't have time to waste. Ryu stops her saying he still has one question for the creature. He checks her status. She's only level 32. Her species is listed as Sample A, and she's marked as something like an angel. After that, she starts telling her story. She says she was born in a barren place where she ate anything smaller than her. She didn't need real thought to live like that. As she kept feeding, she kept evolving. And that was the only way to live and grow stronger. But every other creature there did the same. She survived a long time and devoured many things. Even so, next to the giant predators, she was tiny and weak. Most of the time, all she could do was run. If she failed, she would die, and one day another monster attacked her. She says that time she failed and was badly wounded. When she was barely able to crawl, she saw a strange crack. So she ran for it. And at the last second, she made it through alive. She had no idea what had happened, but she kept running until she finally felt safe. That's when a little boy found her and called out to his parents about something strange nearby. When they came over, they found the small creature there. She says the place felt strange, but food was always there when she was hungry. And she never had to hunt. She also wasn't attacked while she was weak. The mother asks where the little thing came from, and the father says he doesn't know, but with how fast it heals, it has to be some kind of wild monster, even if he's never seen one like it. Their son gets excited and says maybe they found a new species. The father isn't so sure. While the mother quickly says they are not raising that creature in the house. The boy pleads with his dad, but the father warns that even if it looks cute because it's still young, it's still a wild monster and could be dangerous. He says it can stay only if it doesn't live inside, which annoys the mother, but he still refuses to let them keep it in the house. The boy points out that his father is a veterinarian, so if they just feed the little creature, it should recover. And once she eats, she says it tastes really good. Everyone freezes. The boy asks if she just talked, and now even the father is fascinated. Still, the mother worries. What will the villagers say if they find out the family is keeping a wild beast in the house? The creature says those large beings stopped scaring her after she spent time with them, and little by little she started to understand them. The veterinarian became interested in her power to absorb traits from whatever she ate, and thanks to that, she was able to live peacefully with the family. Later, the mother felt bad seeing her stuck indoors all the time, so she began secretly taking her out to the village. The boy loved reading, often fell asleep beside her, and eventually gave her a name. He called her Snow White, but one day she notices the boy acting strangely. He asks if she came because she's scared of the cold. Somewhere else, the father says the boy shouldn't be out there because his whole life has been affected by an unknown illness, but the doctor tells them not to worry. He says he's a highly skilled doctor. Many doctors had come before, and none of them could cure their son, but this doctor did, so the father thanks him. The elf explains that he only restored the boy's life force, then thanks the family for letting him stay there. What really amazes him though is that they're raising this creature at home. The father explains that he found her by chance, and that she can absorb the abilities of creatures she eats. That's her special trait. The elf's interest spikes right away. Even so, the father offers payment, but the elf refuses it, and says all he wants is help, staying in the village. The father thinks he's very kind, but she had already noticed that this man had medicine that cured people, and there was something very strange about his smile. The father helps convince the villagers that the elf is a good person. At first they refuse, but over time they accept him, and the sickness in the village slowly starts to fade. Still, people with weak bodies couldn't survive the medicine itself, and that included the little boy. The once lively house falls silent, the laughter disappears, and no one is left to call her by name. The family was hit by a pain different from the village's illness. She felt this was something medicine couldn't fix, so she decided to go to his grave and think of a way to make people say his name again. So she dug up the grave, and when she returned home, the parents were horrified by what they saw. She wondered if that was really wrong. She says Snow was hurting just like his mother and father, but now the child wouldn't suffer anymore, because Snow would become the family in his place. Instead, the terrified father attacks the monster. Soon the villagers gather with torches outside the house, saying they saw a monster digging up the grave. By the time she came back to her senses, it was already too late. She tried to run, but the people couldn't accept what she looked like. When she tried to go back to the crack, she had grown too large to fit through it. Maybe she could have escaped another way, but she didn't want to leave. Then an arrow hit her in the back. People shouted asking what kind of monster she was and where that crack came from. They decided the disease must have spread because of her. She screamed that it wasn't her fault. The villagers panicked when the monster spoke, but then they all moved in to kill her. And the one who made them do that was the creature herself. Somewhere along the way, she had developed the power to control the bloodsuckers. Those monsters were the real cause of the illness in the village, and because she had fed on the little boy's body, she gained that ability too. Right when she was about to be killed, the elf appeared and said she wasn't a monster, even if she believed she was. That's right. With her power, she can change how humans see monsters like her. If that happens, she might finally get to live like a human. Then he cast a spell to hold back her urge to kill people. She also gave that man 2 of her 4 eyes, so he could use her abilities. So they'd figure the elf planned all of this from the start. But Kivye points out something else. The bigger issue is that they still don't know what he wants with Rondell. So she asks where they are now. But Madame pushes back. Does she really think helping them will change anything? Just because the elf betrayed her? To them, she'll still just be a monster. The only difference is that she'll die later instead of now. A test steps closer and says he once lived in a cage and had to kill humans too. He still regrets it. But Kivye tries to cut in, but the protot tells her to wait and watch what happens. Madame asks if he's saying she should live like him, and he feels for her. But a test says fighting to stay alive isn't a sin. Using bloodsuckers to kill and attack people, she snaps back that Attis doesn't understand. And if she could become human like him, or if people would at least stop looking at her like a monster, Attis suddenly hugs her and says that deep down, both of them are monsters. And that part won't change. No matter how much they try to deny it, it's still true. Then he asks her if she's really sure no one ever cared about her. That makes her remember the moment the father came at her, and the mother stepped in front of him. That's when she lost control. Kivye then asks if they're seriously just going to stand there watching. They need to end this. The protot agrees. They'll finish this, find Rondell, and take down the second prince. Her sword drops, and she breaks down crying. Back in the village, everyone seems to be under control, and they're leaving with her. Attis asks Nave if she's done. She says yes. She sent all the Eldians out of the village, so they'd be outside the tree's mind control, and once they get far enough, the bloodsuckers should die off too. The protot tells them to wait a little longer until everyone is farther away. Attis tells her that if they handle things one at a time, this should all work out. Navek adds that she also erased the village's memory of seeing a dragon. And Attis tells her that was smart, but Pyrrha is already giving her that judging look, and then she starts complaining that her shoulders hurt. She says it must be from helping the protot carry him to the creature, then brags about how useful she is. The others just tell her it's probably because she hasn't turned into a dragon in a long time. The protot adds that she might have just gained weight. That sets her off. She jumps at him yelling that he's 3 times heavier and has no room to talk. But then she looks over at Kivye. The protot asks why she seems so worried. If it's because of Rondell, she says yes. He points out that the second prince still needs Rondell for his plan. So why worry? Kivye says it's because of him, because he belongs to her. She explains that since he's a Ratnian, even the gods can't predict what he'll do. If someone like him starts changing fate, then every prophecy from someone who exists for the gods could fail. That's why from now on, he has to do what she says. That's the deal between him and the goddess's representative. The helper just says fine, and she tells him it's time to go. Then she admits she's honestly shocked he managed to stop her from killing that thing. If he had it, they probably couldn't have stopped the second prince's plan. She also says she never expected the protot to notice there was another dark scheme behind all this. He says he didn't know the second prince's plan either, but the status window showed her race as an angel, and that gave it away. So the protot explains he only stopped her because he saw that she was from that race. She's confused, and the protot is basically like, how do you know about terracotta demons but not angels? Then they notice a bug-like creature, and a whole swarm starts pouring out of the tree. What are these monsters? Did they come through the gap? Kivye immediately says the plan has changed, and kicks the protot into the hole. She says they need to kill every creature marked as angels, and the two of them will close the portal. Then she jumps in after him. The elf starts talking about monsters never seen before on this continent. He wonders if this trap is linked to another dungeon on some far-off land. Then he says it's a relief he managed to block their path thanks to Rondell. But Rondell says he's making the wrong choice, and admits he can't even control these creatures. So the elf says that's exactly why he needs his help. All Rondell has to do is carefully open the gap at the right time. He claims it's for the good of the elf kingdom. Rondell isn't buying that. He asks what his father and older brother would think of this. The elf calls them all liars. Then he asks if Rondell ever wondered why he and his twin brother, the Lost Prince, can't control the World Tree. But he can. That power is supposed to appear only in the eldest son of the royal elf line. He says the Lost Prince acted like a fool, fell for a human woman and forgot his duty. To protect his son, the Elf Kingdom pretended that his grandson was actually his own son. And the Lost Prince even planned to pass the throne to a half-blood. If that happened, the royal elf bloodline would be stained forever. That's why, just like with Rondell's mother, he sent assassins after him too, but they failed. The second he finishes saying that, he gets flicked in the face and goes flying. The Prota says he should be grateful that was all he got, because if the Prota had punched him, well, he's even luckier. Kivye didn't do it. If she had, his head wouldn't still be attached. He stares in shock and asks what they're doing there. How they even got in. Snow says she trusted him. She thought he cared about her, but he was hiding everything. Now she knows that from the start, when he came to the village as a doctor, he was only planning to infect everyone with bloodsuckers. He panics, asking how she's still alive. Then he turns on the others. Why didn't they kill her? Why are they working with a monster? Kivye asks if Rondell has been poisoned or needs help, but he bolts and after seeing the elf, says that he was right. If he gives someone his blood, he can control even a half-elf. He orders everyone not to move. The Prota asks if Snow can do anything, but she says the only one who can control him is the elf. He reminds Rondell of what he asked him to do, and Rondell says yes, before grabbing the world tree and starting to open the gap. Kivye yells at him to stop. This isn't a normal dungeon. She reveals that the portal actually connects to another world, Ormflus. The Prota asks why something like that is here, and she explains that now the goddess of darkness has lost her power. Ratna's protection is fading, and dimensional cracks are starting to appear. Angels weren't created by the goddesses at all. They came from Ormflus, and they're being used to test for a war against Ratna. The elf repeats, Ormflus. If that's true, then it's dangerous enough to wipe out the whole world. So why are they hesitating? All they have to do is kill him and Rondell. But the truth is, everything he just said is a complete lie. The Prota reaches for his sword, and the elf yells that if he plans to destroy the crack with a wooden sword, he's an idiot. But out of nowhere, a hand grabs him. And this creature is huge. They explain that after feeding on this elf, it evolved faster, and its size depends on how much it's eaten. In other words, this thing has been alive for years. The Prota checks the guide and sees Angel Specimen, level 148. Navi says the creature has lived a long time, and it'll devour everything, so the Prota leaps in and smashes its head. Grievous thinks it's good the gap isn't fully open yet. They can still kill the other angels, but they have to keep this crack closed. But when he sees the attack didn't do anything, he yells that this is going to take time, and warns everyone to watch out for Rondell. The creature only pulls its head back into the other world, and when the Prota notices, it flings him away. Seeing that, he drags his sword and says this is the world of Ormflus, the Rocky Mountain. He never thought he'd be dragged back to that hell again, so the Prota says if that thing ate the second prince, that could be bad. Meanwhile, Grievous tries to wake Rondell, and Nev says she thought his mind control would end once the second prince died. But Grievous explains that's not the problem. The real issue is that Rondell got too close to the world tree as a half-elf. Nev starts crying and asks if this is her fault, but Grievous tells her no, it's just time to go. When he looks at the slit, tons of creatures are already trying to pour out. At the same time, blue flames spread everywhere. Hades quickly sets up ice barriers, and the beasts start slamming into them. Fear says they may be many, but they aren't that strong. Hades points out that Ratna has only stayed safe because dungeon monsters usually can't stay outside for long. So Fear realizes that if these things remain out here, the whole world will be in serious danger. But then the creatures start biting and devouring each other instead. Hades remembers that when they eat one another, they gain new skills and become even more aggressive. Then he tries to strike one, but his attack does nothing. Fear asks what went wrong, He says the fragment of Ormflus is refusing to harm the angel, and by the time he notices, it has already grown 2 huge wings. Then more changes appear, as in the middle, and now 4 wings total. Right after that, it fires a laser straight at both of them. Meanwhile, Ryu is dodging non-stop and swinging his sword, but when he lands a hit, the blade barely does anything. He realizes it's the same problem. His power fades the moment he tries to attack the creature, then it slams into him, and he gets sent flying. He knows taking a hit from a level 140 monster is deadly, but he still can't figure out why his aura won't work, even against something openly hostile. Then the guide shows up, non-attackable target, dedicate your life to the agent of God while marking the angel, and clearly that thing is already mutated. Meanwhile, more angels start appearing. Kivye says they aren't individually strong, but their numbers are the real problem. Then she asks Nev if there's any way to destroy the slit. Nev says that in her experience, prey on the other side never simply disappears, so Kivye says they have no choice. They need to find a way to seal the gap. Nev admits it might be possible, but the only person who can do it is Rondell, and in his current state, that's impossible. Then, just as they finally notice something coming from above, Watson and Effa rush in, yelling for everyone to get out. At that exact moment, the angel fires another beam. They dive into the portal and the angel chases them in, tearing through everything. When it lines up another shot at them, they barely manage to dodge, and the blast hits another angel instead. That one gets furious and attacks back. Effa can only stare and ask what kind of place this is. His Wat says it's lucky they're fighting each other instead of chasing them, but they need to find Ryu. He has to be nearby. Ifer says the fragment of Ormflus doesn't activate against these creatures, so he is probably not fighting at full strength either. If he can't face a strong enemy properly, this is going to get very dangerous. Then Wat spots him and tells Effa to go get the protagonist. And Ryu is in terrible shape. He looks completely wrecked. Back with the others, Kivye says the larger angel seems to have wiped out all the smaller ones. Then Rondell wakes up. Nave asks if he's okay, but he immediately asks her to bring him to the roots. She warns him it's dangerous, yet he insists. As a member of the royal elven family, he asks her to help him do what he must. That leaves her quietly thinking. Meanwhile, Watts and Ifer are carrying Ryu back, and he says he's fine. This was normal for him in the Rocky Mountains. After resting thanks to them, he says he's ready for round 2. Watts can tell he's badly injured and fighting like before should be impossible, but MC still means it. Kivye says there's no point in trying to kill the angel anymore. Their real goal now is to hold them back and stop anything from crossing the gap. As they move to close it, Rondell appears among the vines. Eight asks if she's about to kill him, because leaving them there changes nothing. Nave says calling him back is impossible. His consciousness is already gone, but she's keeping his body alive with the bloodsuckers. Julie. Kivye reminds them she already explained Rondell's fate, and as the goddess vessel, she says the people of Latna can only keep receiving her blessing if they take responsibility for protecting life. That is why they were created, to keep Latna from being destroyed. But then Atise throws up a wall of ice and reflects the blast coming from inside the breach, sending it right back into the creature's face. Atise says she'll buy as much time as she can, but she doesn't think she can last long. She's clearly a little shaken. She really has to fight that angel. Then Rien grabs onto the vines and says he's going in too. He points out that they can't cut the world tree's roots without aura, and she's the one who said he couldn't use aura because of the guide. She tells him to stop and asks if he's forgotten the promise he made. He said he would respect her choice. But Reem says that's exactly why he's doing this. When she first came to give them the goddess mission, she had no reason to bring up Rondell's fate. They probably would have gone straight to find the boy, but she still told them what would happen to him. Even if she didn't realize it then, that was the moment she chose to save Rondell from that fate. She starts crying and says that even if that's true, there's still nothing they can do. They can't beat the angels, and they can't close the gap without Rondell's sacrifice. But Ryu says there is. There's a way for him to fight for real. Both of them are already pushed to the limit, and then that terrifying aura shows up. The creature senses it, and the story behind it comes out. It was the only one that survived for over 25 years, the strongest thing in that area. It ate everything and everyone, and no matter how much more it consumed, it couldn't grow any stronger. It had already reached the top of the food chain, doing nothing had become better than moving. It was completely bored, so this situation finally excites it. For the first time it smells its own blood and feels pain, along with a killing intent it has never known before. Then Ryu tears into its arm with a brutal strike. The creature screams in hunger while that nearly black aura keeps pouring off him. Neville asks what kind of magic she used to let the protagonist fight that monster. Kivye says it wasn't magic at all. Ryu is using her divine power. By controlling the guide, she let him use its rules against it, tricking the system so it no longer reads the angel as an angel. On top of that, their auras are partially blended. Nev asks if this is really the full extent of her power. Kivye explains there is a limit to how much she can fool the guide. Then she says she'll go get what's in a fire, asking Nev to stay and watch over Rondell. Rondell weakly tells her not to go, but he's barely awake. Nev tells her to leave it to her, then asks if Kivye still has any blood left. Kivye says she used too much of her power, and if Rondell suddenly wakes up explaining everything will be hard. So she'll go bring them back, while Nev remains with Rondell, because he needs her. Kivye smiles and quietly thanks her. Then the angel lunges at Ryu again. Memsi says he's aiming for its head, but it keeps dodging. A second later his hand gets smashed apart in a clash. Ryu drops to the ground and says fine. If that's how it is, he'll start tearing up the whole battlefield. Then he leaps straight at the angel. It swings at him, but when it looks again, he's already on the other side. Ryu comes in with his sword and rips through the creature's arm. He realizes it used that arm to protect its head, but the monster attacks again with the same injured arm. It tears up half the mountain, and then this time Ryu truly rips the arm apart. But the creature spots him and fires a laser that burns through his clothes. Luckily Watts throws up a reflector, and the blast bounces back into the creature's face. As it crashes down, Reem asks if the two of them are okay. Watts says he's fine, but Aoife's arm is broken, and she says she won't be able to fly. He tells them he'll handle the monster, so they shouldn't push themselves and should head toward the breach. But right then he gets hit again, and the mountain starts to collapse. As Aoife begins to fall, Shin rushes in and saves her. He warns them not to give that thing any time. It ate an elf, and now it's evolving faster and faster. Then the creature's form changes again into something even worse. This is bad. It opens its mouth and starts charging up its full power. Then the blast races straight toward Ryu. He tells Watts to remember how they killed that spider, so Watts casts ice magic, and the sword gets coated in frozen power. The protagonist lets out a roar and hurls the blade, sending it flying forward right into that massive attack. Watching from afar, Kivye thinks this has to end soon. Her power won't last much longer. The sword keeps cutting through the energy, pushing closer and closer to the creature. Then it pierces one of its fangs, and the monster finally realizes the strike is right there. In the next instant, Ryu appears and says he finally left its head exposed. If it loves eating so much, then eat this. He slams in a crushing blow, and then he splits the creature's head open. But a hand starts coming out along with a wing. Snow tells him he never should have gone for the head, because that was only a shell. Ryu is stunned. A shell? Just an empty body. Then he looks back and sees the real monster behind him, furious. It lunges at him, and both of them are thrown back. Watts notices something strange. The old body's legs are still standing there by themselves. For a second, the monster even looks shaken. Watts just stares at it, smiling under his wings. Reem yells for him to get out of there, then charges the monster himself, but it slips past the attack. MC thinks Watts might survive this, but Aoife definitely can't handle an angel like this. When he glances over, Aoife is hyperventilating. She can barely get out a cry for help. Watts figures the level gap is causing it, but he still keeps going. Watts says he's sure the main body was destroyed. But Snow explains the truth. As monsters evolve and gain more power, they pile up useless abilities. After eating the elf, it realized that too, so it evolved again and dumped all those useless powers into the old body. Watts realizes that if its mind has grown this much too, then they're in real trouble. Meanwhile, Ryu and the monster keep trading blows. He quickly figures out that even though its new body is smaller, its strength hasn't dropped at all. Worse, it's getting more annoying by the second. Its sharp attacks make this feel less like a fight with a monster and more like a duel. The aura around its wing even looks like Ryu's own aura. If he's right, this thing is copying him. And then another clash hits. The protagonist moves into strike, but the angel closes the gap and knocks his attack aside. MC is completely caught off guard. Before he can react, a kick slams into his chin. He's still airborne when the angel follows up with a side slash. Ryu can't make sense of it. This thing is using his moves. The monster is straight up copying him. He barely gets his sword up in time to block part of it. and right after that, the angel goes for another slash. That's when Watts fires a fireball at it. Ryu sees the opening and realizes the copied vertical and side slashes are way too dangerous to ignore. Then he looks over and sees Watts still there. Reem shouts that he already told them to leave or this will get even worse. Snow answers that running won't solve anything if this monster escapes to Latna. It's over. Then Effa attacks too. She admits she can't do much, but she'll still help however she can. He is shocked they're still trying to fight. Then the angel finally speaks. It says they're in the way and tells them not to interfere. As Ryu rushes in again, he notices the angel is wounded and bleeding. But it ignores that and aims at the others, firing a cross-shaped strike at them. Ryu panics. He screams and a bright flash bursts out. At that same moment, Kivye senses something huge coming. Whatever it is, it's moving so fast it tears everything apart on the way. Then someone appears and stops the falling rocks. Kivye looks up and sees who it is. Back at the cross-strike, Snow grabs Ormflus's gem and bites down on it. Ryu shouts while everything around them starts collapsing. When the dust clears, the X-shaped mark is there, yet the protagonist is already charging the angel again. The monster laughs and says all it did was wipe out others of its own kind and somehow it got stronger. To it, that's fascinating. Ryu's done listening. He says he'll just split it in half. Both of them unleash cross strikes, crashing straight into each other. The force tears through everything around them. When it ends, both have deep marks across their chests. The angel just laughs. That only makes Ryu matter, so he answers with a chain of explosions. But then the guide interrupts. Abnormal intrusion detected. MC tries to press the attack, but suddenly his strength drops and the tape-like bindings start coming apart. The angel stares at him and asks why he stopped. Ryu is already coughing up blood and the guide announces that all user actions will be frozen while it analyzes the system. The angel sounds disappointed. What is this? It was having fun. Even so, Ryu forces himself to move and tells it to shut up and die. The angel looks at him and says he is the best opponent he's had. Then a strip of tape flies into the angel's face, blocking its sight. And Kivye uses that opening to grab Ryu and pull him to safety. He tells her he needs help hacking the system again, but Kivye warns that even if she does, he can't beat the angel in his current condition. So they need to retreat for now. The angel notices and shouts for them to bring back his toy. The protagonist starts yelling that even if he dies, he'll at least, but the tape wraps around his head before he can finish. Kivye snaps at him, calling him an idiot. If either of them dies here, Ratnok could be destroyed, and what happens to his friends if he throws his life away? That question hits hard. The angel rages, furious that more pests are ruining his fun. Then roots burst out across the ground, wrapping around him. In an instant, they trap him in a cocoon. Ryu realizes those are roots from the world tree. More and more roots pour out of the dimensional crack and the one controlling them is the prince. He tells everyone to move fast, the vines won't hold for long, so they hurry through the crack. Atiz checks their injuries, but Ryu is more shocked that they survived at all. He asks if they weren't hit by the cross strike. Ifer says if it had landed directly they'd be dead. Snow saved them by taking in Ormflus's blessing and blocking the attack. MC asks where Snow is. Atiz says he doesn't know when they open their eyes. They were already being dragged away by the world tree roots. That leaves him shaken and Kivye is rattled too. Still, she shouts that there's no time. If they leave a dimensional crack like this, it'll keep growing. And if that happens, Ratnok will be in danger. Their only chance is to seal it with the world tree roots. The prince agrees. He tells everyone to pour all the life force they can into the roots. If they control them together, they can close the crack. The world tree roots begin spreading through the entire rift. The prince says Kivye seems to know a lot about this phenomenon and asks her to explain it later. She agrees but says Rondell also needs to hear the truth. The prince nods and says everything will be revealed. The crack is almost sealed except for one thing, the wing. It reaches out from inside, grabs the crack and says it won't let them escape. Then it starts charging up power. The pressure is insane. Kivye realizes the attack is aimed at Ryu. The protagonist knows he still can't move because of the guide, but then Snow appears, grabs the wing and throws off the shot. The monster demands to know what she's doing. They're the same race, so why is she getting in his way? Snow shouts back that yes, she is like him, but Kivye pulls her away and says Snow is nothing like him. Snow looks fired up, but the angel starts forcing its way through too. It's almost out. Just as it moves to attack, Kivye gets hit right in the face by Prana. Snow is pulled in too, but even then the crack finally closes, and once it's over, only the horde remains there. Far away the villagers are panicking, asking what's happening to their village. Some of them beg the hunter to go kill the monster, but he says his only order is to protect the villagers. They even offer all their money if he'll save the village. Still watching from a distance, he says it looks like it's over. The villagers keep screaming for help. He just answers, what do they expect him to do, pull out some secret weapon? Then the horde appears and fires a single arrow of light. As she moves, he mutters that sometimes ignorance really is a blessing. The scene shifts back to the others, and Ryu can't believe she handled the angel with one attack. The horde walks up and asks if they're all right. The prince tells her they got through this thanks to her help. She lands beside Ryu and the others, and the moment he sees her expression, he knows something big is coming. She looks at the three of them and flicks her middle finger, releasing a burst of power. MC quickly tells Atiz to stay behind him, but the amount of prana is overwhelming. Then flowers and leaves start swirling through the air. A second later, everyone realizes how absurdly pure that prana is. It heals all of them at once. Reem looks down in shock. His wound is gone, like it was never more than a scratch. She says the lost prince told her about them, and as a representative of the Fairy Alliance, she wants to thank them. For now, healing their injuries is all she can do, but she promises they'll be properly rewarded later. 2 days pass. In the Elven Kingdom Palace, the council gathers for a meeting. The report says witnesses saw a door to another dimension open, and this is the information they've collected on that portal. One dwarf representative says it led to a place filled with intelligent monsters no one knew about. He regrets they didn't arrive sooner, since they could have tested their new weapons. Another ruler replies that if ancient dwarfs were able to kill those things, then the monsters themselves aren't the real problem. The danger is that one of them tried to cross over to this side. The monster crossed over on its own, but at least Rulian stopped it fast. She says she only landed the finishing blow. Without Prince Rondell and the other hunters risking their lives to wear it down, she probably couldn't have stopped it at all. The Fairy King says Volta and his team are truly impressive. The Dwarf King agrees the hunters helped seal the breach, but he still can't figure out how that happened. Then he asks if they might be tied to that earlier incident. The Elf Prince admits the one behind that incident was his late twin brother. He says the Elf Kingdom is to blame for failing to keep watch over him, and the price they paid was Rondell falling into a coma that shocks everyone in the meeting. And then he adds one more thing. He asks them not to doubt the heroes who protected the Elf Kingdom's future. The Dwarf King says he'd like to meet those hunters, and the prince promises to arrange it when he can. The Fairy King thinks they should hold a celebration and give the group their reward, but something still feels off. The Kingdom spies say these breaches are showing up all across Latna. If that's true, why haven't Garhan, who rules the biggest land, or is Inovia from the Kingdom of Magic Tools, done anything about it? Halyang stumbles over her words, but the Elf Prince cuts in. If they want to learn what's causing this, working with the other nations on the continent, and with the Fairy Alliance is unavoidable. During the transmission, Garhan says he can't name the cause yet because his investigation still isn't finished. The Archmage adds that if something like this were happening in her land, she'd be looking into it too. But right now, that isn't easy. Halyang says they only avoided something worse because they got warned ahead of time, but she also knows both of them are busy searching for the demon god's blessing. Still, Latna is in crisis. She says they need to find Barolt, just like before, but she gets cut off. Garhan says they're human, not long-lived like the nymphs, and they're close to reaching immortality through the blessing of Ormflus. The Archmage asks if Halyang thinks that goes against the will of the gods. Holding herself together, she says there's no way she could choose to wish for her friends to die before her. So the Archmage says that if they want to save Latna like the four heroes once did, they'll have to leave the current issue to Halyang. She says she understands but asks them to tell her right away if they learn anything more about the breaches. Once the transmission ends, Garhan lets out a tired sigh and complains that they talk too much. In short, they decided not to tell Halyang anything. Garhan says he knew the goddess being gone would throw the world off, but he never thought it would get this bad enough for the worlds of Ormflus and the goddess of darkness to start mixing. The other person says it should be fixed once they absorb all of the goddess's power, and adds that even if Halyang is only a healer, she supposedly has the highest level of all of them. Still, they can't be sure that's true because the Sword King refused to have his level measured. That's what makes him a real wild card. After that, Garhan gets in touch with one of his subordinates and asks for an update. The man says Halyang will probably stay in the Elf Kingdom and the Alliance leaders won't let news about the breaches go public. Gahan orders him to keep watching Halyang so she doesn't learn that they're gone. And if anyone finds out even part of the plan, he wants that person eliminated. The man says he got the message. Odysseus says it would help if Rondel woke up soon, since he's still stuck in a coma. But the real problem, Prada says, is Halyang. Odysseus doesn't think she has Ormflus's blessing because if she did, she'd be able to see their levels. And if that were the case, she should have been shocked that Prada, who's only level 5, fought an angel way above that and then still healed everyone after the battle. Prada says that if Halyang had turned on them right then, they'd all be dead. Her healing power is probably equal to her attack power, which means she's insanely strong. He adds that trying to learn whether Halyang is working with Gahan and Zenobia would be risky. They were allies in the past, so their best shot at finding the Sword King is to do it before another breach opens and more angels come through. Then he admits he already misses Snow. Someone asks who Snow is and right then a fairy appears, calling himself Sylph, the king of righteous thieves. He asks if they're the hunters hired by the Elf Kingdom while grabbing a first by the collar. Nazi asks what a Sylph is doing down here when their kind lives at the top of the tree. He only smirks and says if they want answers, they should chase him. So Nazi reaches for his staff, only to remember it was destroyed. That means they all have to run after Sylph until he stops at a wall. Protor realizes he led them away from the city on purpose. He wants to fight. Sylph says he won't be the one facing Volta. Then calls over a dwarf warrior. The guy charges in without hesitation, thanking Volta for helping test his new weapon. Protor can tell these two are bad news and starts wondering what they're after. Sylph says he brought the Dwarf King to face Volta because that was the king's own request. Still, Sylph keeps staring at the necklace, asking what it really is. He says it looks exactly like Rolian's necklace. If Freya tries to grab it back but Sylph is faster, she realizes that if she stays away from the necklace too long, she'll turn back into a wyvern. Sylph says that makes him even more curious about them. At the same time, the Dwarf King gets his small weapon ready. Protor stares at it, confused, and the dwarf just says, "Take this, kid." The weapon charges up with crystal energy, and then it tears through everything in front of it. Protor expected one blast, but this thing fires like a machine gun. When the dwarf finally stops shooting, he looks up and sees Protor blocked every shot with his sword. Protor casually asks, "That it?" The Dwarf King gets mad and says he's only getting started. Since the bullets didn't work, he rushes in for a close-range fight. And now the two of them are really about to go all out. Hate wonders what Volta is doing, because while fighting, he's studying the dwarf's armor. The special patterns on it look high class, so this probably isn't some normal fighter. It's someone from royalty. Then Hades notices the weapon tossed aside. It uses magic stones, and since he doesn't have a wand, maybe he can still make use of it. He keeps his eyes on the weapon. Meanwhile, Sylph flies off, bragging that his kind is great at hide and seek. Even so, he praises her for keeping up. If Freya is right behind him, moving like a streak of light. Sylph even says she flies like she's done it all her life. But if Freya just yells at him to give the necklace back, then he says it's time to change tactics. And when she's just about to catch him, he uses a skill and turns into a beam of light. Freya realizes it's magic, and while she's still in the air, she hears Sylph's voice saying that even if he stole the necklace, it doesn't seem like it really belongs to her. Freya snaps back that she has no interest in talking to a thief, and tells him to return it while she's still being nice. He suddenly appears behind her and says, if that's how she wants it, they'll play a game. If she gets the necklace back within 10 minutes, he won't ask another question and will let her keep it. But if she fails, he'll make her tell him the truth. Meanwhile, Kivye is somewhere else, trying to reach the goddess Kivye, but she can't connect. That means she still can't learn where the Sword King is. She starts thinking it may be time to leave the king to the elves. When someone behind her says, Rondel will be crushed if she goes. Kivye turns and asks what he's doing there. It's the Elf King. He says that since he worships the Earth Goddess, showing up at the sanctuary of the Goddess of Darkness without proper clothes would be disrespectful. Even so, he knows people would probably say he's lost his mind. Kivye then asks if it's true that the wise Elf King got a young human woman pregnant. And if that's true, then pretending to be forgetful would make sense. The Elf King says she seems to know a lot, but Kivye admits she was only guessing. He explains that the nobles demanded the royal elven bloodline stay pure, so the prince had to be seen as fully royal. Because of that, the boy never learned who his real mother was. Kivye quietly says he must have thought that was best for Rondel and for the kingdom. But the king says he understands that the goddess of darkness rules over death and endings, so he asks Kivye if she thinks that goddess Kivye would forgive him. He waits for her answer, still carrying the weight of what he did. Kivye just smiles and says, yeah, definitely. The king thanks her, and then as they head out, the king says he's just an old man with little time left, but if he can help, he will. Kivye says she needs to talk it over with her companions first. That a clairvoyant suddenly rushes out of the forest and they turn to look back at the fight. Hades had fired a huge weapon and it created a massive pillar of ice. Prota can break free, but he's freezing. Hades quickly uses magic to warm him up. That makes Prota wonder if Hades was really the one who cast the ice spell, since he's only level 54. What shocks him most is that the magic actually worked. Even Licker's level 70 magic couldn't affect him like that. Then Kriv shows up and climbs onto Prota's back. With a little wink, she reminds him she told him not to stand out. Prota tries to defend himself, but Kriv cuts in and asks what kind of excuse could possibly justify attacking the Dwarf King. Only then does Prota realize the king was the dwarf and Hades was the one beside him. So the two of them team up to break the ice pillar. After a while, the Dwarf King just looks miserable, saying they destroyed his baby. Hades apologizes and explains that the weapon only broke because he used a magic stone that had already been enchanted, like ammo. He never thought it would actually destroy the weapon itself. The Dwarf King is stunned because he never even considered using a magic stone as ammunition. Hades says sorry again, but the Dwarf King tells him there's no need. He's been trying for a long time to make that weapon stronger, so now he wants Hades to explain exactly what changed. He plans to copy it. The two end up talking for a long time, going over how the weapon works and how it could be improved. By the end, the Dwarf King is thrilled. He grabs the weapon and says he'll start the upgrades right away. Hades is basically like, so we're good? The Elf King says it seems the Dwarf King really took a liking to him, even if the guy is stubborn. Still, the Dwarf King tells him to stop making junk like those little shacks, then asks where a fire is. When they look, all they can see are streaks of lightning, as Sylph says she at least knows the basics of sword magic. He adds that her reflexes are pretty sharp too, but she's still not faster than him. A fire starts to realize he's clearly above her level. On top of that, he knows exactly how to use his speed in the air. Sylph then says that when a magic swordsman can read his moves, that's a problem, because it lets her catch him off guard. He slips behind her and goes for her back, but a fire still blocks it. Sylph says he was getting excited and didn't expect that. But when he looks down, a fire is already coming at him at full speed. She appears right in front of him and attacks. He actually praises her, saying it was a good try, but a fire tells him he still doesn't get the trouble he's in. That's when he notices the two knives she threw are now behind him. He starts wondering if she can really fight with 4 blades, so he activates his power with both swords and slips away. Then he admits that even if her level is low, she has real experience, and the talent to control that many weapons makes him even more curious. Still, rules are rules. The amulet he had with him drops to the ground and a fear goes after it, but it crumbles apart. As she's picking it up, someone suddenly appears right in front of her, and we know exactly who it is. A fear recognizes him as the man from the dragon's nest. He comes down and asks if she's okay. A fear thanks him and realizes he apparently doesn't remember her. Then someone arrives calling for Richard and complains that one of her bodyguards vanished out of nowhere. A fear recognizes Holian's voice. She tells him not to shout her name like that, and explains she's walking around the Elven Kingdom in secret. A fear asks why. Holian says the Caravan Guild is in town, and since they brought food from all over, she came out to try some before they leave tomorrow. After the ceremony, she'll have to return to the Kingdom of Nymphs anyway. Then she asks if the two of them know each other. Richard says no, but he was just about to check an item that looks a lot like Holian's. Out of nowhere, Sulph appears, and Holian asks what King Sulphid is doing there, adding that his outfit is pretty flashy. Sulph says he was training a fear. She has no idea what's going on, because she didn't even know he was the king of the Sulphids. He tells her they need to head back and get ready for the ceremony. Then he grabs her and takes off into the air. On the way, he apologizes, saying all of this happened because of him, and that they better return to the Elven Kingdom. A fear agrees. Back in the Elven Kingdom, a serious talk starts. The Elf King says extending the lives of the 4 great heroes, stealing the divine form of the Goddess of Darkness, and weakening Ratna's protection is absolute madness. Even so, he says Holian's law may not be wrong. But Afir insists that someone from the Great Land was with Holian. Prota adds that the ceremony will probably reveal Voltara's true level, and that could cause huge trouble. The Elf King says he'll help search for the Sword King, Barolt. He adds that one good thing about living so long is seeing the gods take form, and by what feels like fate, he got a letter from Barolt. There's no name or clear mark on it, but the writing style is one only Barolt would use. When they check it, one letter says food, and another says water. They figure Barolt is asking for food and water. The king says that's obvious, since the deep parts of dungeons have neither. Then they ask when the first letter arrived. The king says maybe a month ago, maybe a year. To him that's recent, but not if you remember how long elves live. Then he says one more letter came in, a week ago. That last message is just a torn piece of paper, covered in blood. Prota asks if the Sword King is really starving, thirsty, and close to death. The king says the letter came through the Caravan Guild. Prota asks what that is, and Ifa explains it's a huge merchant guild that travels the world trading goods. If they go with the Caravan Guild, there's a good chance they'll run into Barolt. But Ifa says she heard the guild is leaving tonight. Kriv says it's not too late if they leave now. Right then, Rondell shows up and says he'll get ready and come with them. But Kriv turns him down. Rondell says it's fine and says goodbye to Kivye, while Prota tries to say something to him. Kivye cuts in, saying it'll all be over if they miss the Caravan Guild, and they don't have time to babysit a child. As Rondell runs off, he thinks there was no way this would work, and now he'll just be too late, but he really wanted to go. Then he runs straight into the Dwarf King and the Sylphid King. They ask if Rondell is okay, then we jump to the caravan. A man asks if they understand the group is heading into one of the 4 forbidden regions, so they must be pretty confident in their skills. He says he'll feed them if they help fight off any bandits along the way. Then shows the group around. Ifa asks if it's really okay to leave without even saying goodbye. Hade says he doesn't really have much left to do there. While talking with Kivye, Prota says Rondell was the first person she saw when she opened her eyes, and he helped her without asking for anything back. He's sure Kivye wouldn't mind visiting him again someday, but Kivye answers that she doesn't want to lie to Rondell. Then they hear wheels rolling. Someone is coming fast in the distance. Kivye says they only just left the Elven Kingdom and already found bandits. Prota says it looks like they'll have to work before they eat, but Hades notices the details and says that doesn't look like a bandit wagon at all. Hades just says it's moving incredibly fast, and then King Sulphid pops out. The Dwarf King says he doesn't know what's going on, but it isn't right for them to leave like this. He gives Hades a gift, new weapons, and tells him to test them and send back a report, since he already made the changes Hades suggested. At the same time, King Sulphid lands right in Ifa's lap and says he has a gift for her too, a real training manual. He says he wrote it just for her. Hades thanks them, but Kivye hears someone call her name. It's Rondell, holding out a small staff. He says it's better than the spear she uses. Kivye says that's too dangerous, but Rondell tells her he's still weak for now. Next time they meet, he promises he'll be much stronger. Meanwhile, the Dwarf King thinks that Guy really does the dumbest things and heads back toward the caravan. Kivye kisses Rondell on the forehead and says she'll be waiting for him. Since he's already healed, he just shouts to Prota that if anything happens to Kivye, he'll be executed. Everyone says their goodbyes and heads their separate ways. Watching from a distance, the king reflects that life is just a chain of choices, full of sacrifices and mistakes. The longer you live, the more those mistakes pile up, and the heavier that burden gets. It makes him wonder if his masters ever feared the weight of immortality. Behind him, Richard shows up with his sword, while Lee and Hart works to seal one of the dimensional cracks. He notes that the Black Brotherhood has already been taken over by people pretending to be the Goddess of Darkness, yet they're still closing the cracks. That suggests the cracks probably aren't tied to the fake goddess taking power. While they argue, Richard says nobody even knows what these cracks are, so they shouldn't mess with them so recklessly. Still, he wants the artifact Lee and Hart promised him. Lee and Hart, meanwhile, says it looks like someone stole the goddess's power through some kind of divine blackmail. Then he takes the ring and tosses it over. When John asks what's going on, Lee and Hart says there's no time to explain. The moment they look up, Inquisitors have already surrounded them. One of them declares that Lee and Hart is under arrest for investigating without permission and for ignoring the goddess's prophecies. Thrice Lee and Hart, ranked number 1, will be judged by divine law. Back in the Elven Kingdom, the official story is already being spread. The Elven King is announced dead. They tell the people the 11th King ruled for 250 years and died from a long illness in the Imperial Palace. But Richard reveals the truth, the borders were shut down and a massive investigation began. 19 comments that it would have been smarter to kill the king quietly with poison or a curse. Still, the other one points out that spiritualists would have noticed that too, so leaving the king like this was the better move. What matters most now is making sure the other kings and Lady Rolian don't start suspecting them. As expected, the allied kings can't figure out who did this to the Elven King, and Lady Rolian is crushed by grief. But there's still one problem left. She has a spell tied to Richard, and she reminds him that he claimed Volterra and the hunters with him were trapped by magic inside the research institute, and then dealt with. Richard insists the traps went off, so if they all survived, a spell must have broken and let them escape. That answer only makes her furious. She demands to know if he really believes a half-bow magician and a warrior could pull that off. The other one tells 19 to calm down. They're clearly not ordinary people. If Richard's story is true, then they may be chosen by the goddess just like them. But 19 argues that the girl with the polymorph necklace was only level 38, and asks whether Richard is really sure she's a personification of the goddess, especially with the rest of that group. Richard says he saw all of them himself, and even heard one of the women there. Kivye claims she was the goddess personification. He says it's very possible she really is Kivye's personification, since she knows far too much about the heroes, but because the Black Brotherhood doesn't accept that, nobody trusts her. 19 warns it'll be trouble if Barolt finds her. The other one agrees, Barolt will start moving everywhere, so 19 asks what they should do. But the answer is simple, nothing. Elsewhere, the Inquisitors ask if it isn't finally time for him to surrender. But Jong says people are free to choose their own path, and he's not leaving until Leonhardt is released. He's even calmly grilling meat, and the Inquisitor complains that the smell is way too good. Dang actually invites him to come eat, but the man refuses. He's on duty. He adds that if Jong behaves, he might even hand over the item. That's when the owner storms over, says it belongs to him, and drags Jong away. He reminds him that the artifact was only meant to be inspected, so its power could be identified, not given away. Jong answers that he owes Leonhardt too much to stand by while he gets arrested for no reason. The man just takes the ring back, and thinks all he ever wanted was to make money as a hunter. So why is he stuck in this mess? Jong apologizes, admitting he was only upset because he felt too weak to repay what Leonhardt had done for him. The other man tells him none of this is his fault, and he hasn't even been in this world that long. He adds that there's still hope in Divine Court, and Leonhardt is the highest ranked priest. It was already a miracle the two of them were released at all just for being with him. Then they spot Leonhardt restrained in a chair, and someone swings at his head, but the weapon just shatters. Leonhardt orders everyone to get their heads on the floor, and they actually obey. Then he tears into them, calling them idiots who should be ashamed. How could they fail to leave even a scratch on a suspect? He says the Inquisitors of Erecha are supposed to be Kivye's sword, yet every one of them is weak. One Inquisitor apologizes and promises it won't happen again, but then someone else arrives, the Oracle. She says she remembers him from 30 years ago, and notes that time has changed him a lot, though his behavior hasn't changed at all. Leonhardt answers that just like last time he was captured, he still believes he was doing what had to be done. Then she asks if that's really why he chose to go against the prophecy. If he can't explain himself, then as a witness she'll have to take back his blessing. She says it would pain her to watch someone she once recommended as a hero lose his life. Outside, the Inquisitors say they're finally gone, but one of them admits he can't feel relieved. They were trying to save Leonhardt, the same man who taught them that God's word is absolute. Another says it's painful to see someone who taught that rule turn around and break it himself. Then they hear someone running. It's Jong shouting for help. A giant monster is chasing him, and the Inquisitors stare in shock, wondering what that purple golem even is. They notice Jong is missing an arm, or at least they think he is, so the Inquisitors rush to bring him inside and call for a doctor. Of course, that was the whole setup. They already have a monster tamer in place. Earlier, they came up with a plan to control a monster and fake an attack. Since almost no one has that skill, it would work perfectly, because nobody would suspect it. To sneak in, Jong even planned to remove his arm first and put it back later. And that's exactly what happened. Once inside, the two of them make their move. Jong knocks out an Inquisitor, reattaches his arm. And meanwhile, Leonhardt explains that he believes someone is posing as the Goddess of Darkness. The Oracle replies that she can feel the power of prophecy in the Goddess's words, but Leonhardt fires back that the power is probably being stolen. The Oracle says a new prophecy arrived while he was gone and ordered to kill one specific person. Leonhardt asks why something like that has never happened before, since the gods don't interfere with this world in that way. The Oracle admits she's never seen anything like it either, which is exactly why she's troubled. Still, she says they're only humans, so their understanding can't reach the Goddess of Darkness's plans. To her, Leonhardt is working off guesses, and if he keeps going down this path, he won't get another chance. Leonhardt knows that and starts thinking maybe all of this really is just a theory. He still believes he's right, but if he's wrong, then he truly is betraying everything. Then someone enters. Leonhardt asks if it's another round of torture, but this time it's Jong, already trying to break him out. Leonhardt calls him an idiot and says this won't work. He can't just keep barging in like this. So Jong says that after leveling up, he picked the assassin class and used it to hide his presence until he got here. Leonhardt only tells him it's pointless. Force won't break this restraint. He says Jong should have studied the place better before sneaking in. Then the walls suddenly start collapsing, and inquisitors pour in from every side. Jong realizes it was a trap. The Oracle says that just as Leonhardt asked, she had left the two of them alone, but she won't ignore an invasion like this. Leonhardt tells Jong to stop because if he keeps going, he'll only add more crimes to his name. But Jong yells that he doesn't understand what any of them are doing. The Oracle tells him to be quiet, yet Jong keeps going. He admits he's not smart and he might be making a huge mistake. Even so, if that mistake turns into a crime, it's still better than doing nothing and regretting it forever. Leonhardt just calls him an idiot. Jong says sure he is, but he's an idiot with a plan. Then a giant bird crashes through the window, and Loud arrives in monster form, telling them to get on fast. But then a blade slices clean through the creature's neck. The two inquisitors who beheaded it stand there like monsters themselves. They're huge, and the only thing shining is a green glow buried in their stomachs. Leonhardt doesn't even rush to flee. He almost looks like he chose to remain there. The Oracle quietly says that in the end, this is his choice. He changes his mind, saying he thought age had made him wiser. But after watching those two idiots, he realized it only made him more scared. The Oracle warns that by doing this, he's going against the will of the goddess. So there's no turning back. So the two of them give in, and the Oracle admits that even if she sent every unit after them, it would only hurt the Brotherhood. Leonhardt starts to wonder if this was all a test. The Oracle admits she's been thinking the same thing. Then she tosses him a letter. The next target the Brotherhood has been ordered to kill. Just from the sketch, it's clear the target is Valterra and his 3 companions. The charge against them is the same one tied to the Elf King's murder. Officially, the church says the king died of illness, but the Fairy Alliance still isn't sure that's true, and it looks like the assassination really did happen. Leonhardt says everything is lining up, so they need to move fast. Jong insists Valterra would never do something like that. The Oracle says that's exactly why they need to catch Valterra first, because once they do, they can learn who's really behind all this. She adds that she'll try to stall the church's investigation, but that will be nearly impossible because the bounty is too high. And since Leonhardt has ignored orders and acted on his own, he and his companions will be hunted too. As Leonhardt starts to argue that they're not exactly his companions, Jong thanks her for letting them go. Leonhardt sums it up. If they can't catch Valterra and prove the goddess is fake, it's all over. The bigger problem is figuring out how the Elf Kingdom and the Fairy Alliance will respond. Then at the meeting, Rondell greets the Fairy Alliance properly and explains that the new Elf King is extremely busy, so he came in his place. He thanks everyone for their concern, but as Prince of the Elf Kingdom, he has a duty to act. The Dwarf King says that if Rondell is here as the king's stand-in, then he should know the last people to meet the Elf King were Valterra and his friends, and defending them won't change that. Haliang asks what exactly the Dwarf King is implying, but Rondell calmly says he understands. He knows he can't ignore their suspicions. Still, he saw what kind of people they were when they fought together. They took on a mission they had no reason to accept, and they even saved his life. They never backed down either. So if they really meant to start a war with the Elf Kingdom, they wouldn't do it through one simple murder. The Dwarf King says that's how they see Valterra's group too. Another elf leader agrees, pointing out that the scene had no traces left behind, meaning a professional did it. And leaving the body there was likely a setup meant to frame someone else. Haliang agrees as well. So when someone arrives, she decides they need an investigation team to find Valterra's group and speak with them. Then Richard introduces himself as Haliang's assistant and says he'll lead the investigation team. That's huge. Richard is now inside. Even the Dwarf King looks a little suspicious, and one more person joins the team, and that person is Leslie. After that, we cut to the two of them alone. Richard tells her Haliang thinks the seal keeps him from killing anyone else, so she doesn't suspect him. The real question is why Haliang was left out of the larger plan. He says Leslie's new job is just to watch Haliang, adding that in the past she would have hated going on a search mission. But Leslie thinks Valterra's group probably has no idea they're being hunted, and she needs to warn them somehow. Watching Haliang might be easy, but if Haliang becomes the target, that's a whole different level of danger. Richard then brings up Valterra, getting captured before reaching the Elf Kingdom. He asks if she remembers how strong Valterra is, and why she doesn't treat him like a serious threat. Then Leslie thinks back to an old conversation. She says she doesn't know since her mission had nothing to do with Valterra, so she acted like she never paid much attention to him. Richard tells her Valterra is strong enough to stand against Leonhardt, the top Inquisitor, and that's exactly why she isn't being sent after him. That's when Leslie understands this isn't a search mission at all. It's an order to kill Valterra. Right after that, a gunshot blasts apart a log. The main guy praises the shot and jokes that the shooter could make the Olympics. Aisha says his aim has gotten a lot better. They talk a bit about the weapon too. It can deal heavy damage even to giant monsters without much effort, until a glow appears behind them. Then Ifo shows up and a beam of light flashes out. When they look up, Ifo is flying. The main guy says she leveled up again. Attis figures the secret art she learned probably let her control the life force inside her body, and that pushed her level up. Ifo is thrilled, bragging that she's a genius and all that. Then she notices several swords stuck in the ground. The moment the main guy pulls one free, she drops. Looks like she was using some kind of field to stay afloat, but all she does is yell at him to stop messing with her training. After that, the main guy goes over to Kivye and asks if she's training too. She says her role is to be protected. He jokes that she's basically a VIP who does nothing. And Kivye answers that whether she trains or not, her level still won't go up. That's why she's thankful everyone is trying to keep her safe. Still, she asks why he keeps fighting when he's not even from this world. He says that's true, but he was promised they'd send him home once they found the boy. Then he asks if that's even possible anymore. Kivye tells him a goddess's promise is absolute, as long as it doesn't go against the world's laws, it will come true. She also admits something. When she was ready to sacrifice Rondell for her goal, he made her face what she really wanted. So now she asks what his true desire is and why he keeps going. He starts thinking about it, but then they hear a shout. It's the mechanic yelling that refueling is done and everyone needs to get on board. Kivye says they should leave this conversation for later. She was just curious. So they start heading up, while the main guy can only think of one reason to keep fighting. Then we cut to Leonhardt's group and Richard as well. And deep in some unknown place, a single creature is feeding on a pile of bodies. At last we meet the Sword King, then a flashback from 40 years earlier shows Richard's point of view. He had been a soldier, but in this world he ended up becoming a hero. To stay alive he had to battle all kinds of monsters, and he joined other humans just to survive in this world. Back then humans weren't looked down on, and the Terrakios and Rutinians lived side by side. It was an age of peace, but not everyone accepted that life. That's where the Great Land came in. 20 years later, the Great Land decided to free the Rutinians from the goddess control, so they launched a plan to wipe out every goddess. The Rutinians fought back hard, but over time killing them became an obsession for the Great Land, and many of its people were corrupted. Everyone thought the war would go on forever, but in the end it stopped. The four chosen by the goddesses completely destroyed the Great Land. That's the story people tell. In the present, a man drops straight into a beast's mouth and slices it clean in half. Then a massive creature appears. The warriors nearby start arguing, but they're not alone. A whole army is there to face the monster. One side warns the others to stay back because this prey belongs to them, but the others don't care. They're happy to wait until those guys die, then finish the beast themselves. And this monster has the Great Land emblem on its arm. It's called a nightmare, one of the creatures used in the war against the Rutinians. These days humans are used to fighting the Great Land. Then an enormous mine appears and slams into the creature's head, hard enough to crush it. Everyone just stares. It's said that Garhan and Zenobia sealed the humans so they'd be forced to gather magic stones from monsters. Then we're shown a warrior class Terrakia at level 112. After that, we see a driver in the sky dungeon. Inside that driver is Richard looking away, and somehow even a troglodyte notices him. Soon after, there's some kind of interrogation. A woman says she has to go on a mission if she wants out, and adds that a stone that size is barely enough for bread and meat. She says she's been living like this for more than 20 years and no one could stay sane through all of it. Even so, she'd rather take the mission than keep pretending to be the leader of the fake Great Land. Richard tells her everything is in place and says he'll let her gather the rest of the group. But she gets furious and slams her fist into the glass. She tells him to quit the nonsense, calls him a traitor, and says they only ended up like this because Richard sold out his friends to Garhan just to save his own skin. She warns that once they get out, his wife and kids will be dead. But Richard says that won't happen because they already escaped. That shakes her, especially when he says his family was killed by Rytenians. She asks who the target is this time, and the scene cuts to a clear blue sky and our group in the desert. They're trying to figure out where Barolt is hiding. The main guy says the caravan told them someone would meet them out here. Then asks Effa if it might be a good idea for her to turn into an Anvern and guide them. Desu asks if Effa can turn into an Anvern and carry them. But she says that would only make her dry out faster in this heat. He then asks Atiz for ice magic, and Atiz says he could do it if there were any moisture in the air, but there isn't. Fire though, he can still use. Kivye tells everyone to keep moving since they should be close. Then Kivye points ahead and says she sees a place selling ice cream. He laughs it off. There's no way anyone would be selling ice cream out in the desert. A second later, they spot the ice cream tent. The protagonist immediately calls it suspicious, and the others agree the trap is way too obvious. Even so, nobody cares if it's fake. They all rush in for the ice cream. It's ice cream in the middle of the desert. The whole stand gets wrecked in seconds. The little shop is basically destroyed, and Kivye even steps on Ryu's head to reach the ice cream first. Tail wagging, she still manages to grab one. While she's eating, she notices someone coming her way. The guy pulls up on a motorcycle and asks if they really had to trash his shop. Kivye fires back, asking if he was the one who set that trap. He says it's pretty sad to call it a trap. According to him, it really is his shop. Hunting is just his side job. Then the ground suddenly shakes and he gets buried on the spot. After that, Voltaire is pretty much finished. Ryu realizes this is the man the caravan mentioned. The one meant to guide them to the city. So the group heads out with him. They keep moving through the desert until the city finally comes into view. MC asks if Barolt is really in that place, ancient Calais. It's an old ruin in the middle of the desert, famous for being the biggest structure ever carved from stone. No one knows how it was built. With solid rock walls and a giant oasis around it, Callan became a natural fortress right in the center of the continent. Even though the land around it can't grow much, nearby countries never managed to claim it. So Callan grew on its own. That's what the city is now, as the four of them walk through it. Heading deeper into town, Reem asks if Barolt is really somewhere here. Agrivy says yes, or at least there's a strong chance he's inside a dungeon where even the god's awareness can't reach. Wetsy says they'll need to visit a guild first if they want dungeon access. Pyra lights up right away, happy she might get to update her levels. She grabs Wetsy's hand and hurries off. He says she's really excited, and Agrivy just smiles and says she's still young. Watching the two of them, Agrivy says it feels like they've always been together. Ryu agrees they seem to share some kind of bond. That gets Agrivy thinking. A moment later, the protagonist complains that the ground is uneven. Agrivy explains that the city was first built by tomb raiders. But about 35 years ago, they stopped raiding tombs after the dungeon appeared. Hunters started gathering here, and little by little, the city took shape. At least that's what the pamphlet said. Then MC remembers Agrivy is only 1 year old, and pauses. Wait, does that mean they're standing on top of the ruins? Looking down, he realizes yes. The Great Labyrinth of Callan is one of the 4 Great Forbidden Regions. Then a man nearby explains that since it's endlessly deep, the place is incredibly complex. He says their record is descendants of the old tomb raiders, and anyone sightseeing here has to pay a fee. Ryu says getting tricked into that already cost them enough. Then Effia notices something, and he looks too. They spot the 2 spiritualists from before. The Grivy ignores that and focuses on finding the route, the deepest vertical center of Callan. Since this place is usually a tourist spot anyway, she says it might be worth checking out if the others are okay with it. Then Ryu notices, the fear starts to wave at them, but Tuz tells her not to. One of the records warns them not to go over there either. So they keep walking, and Agrivy asks why the protagonist took such a long detour. He says he's basically antisocial. He just doesn't like people. The Grivy isn't buying it. She says he looks angry and asks if he knows those hunters. MC admits he does. So she figures they must be the same group involved when the Wrecker was killed. MC doesn't know that Wrecker is still alive, but Agrivy says she'd be mad too if someone hurt Rondell. Feeling that way is normal. Ryu cuts her off and says to drop it. It's hard to explain, and since it won't affect the mission, she doesn't need to worry about it. It's his problem. Agrivy looks a little hurt, but lets it go, until they hear a woman shouting. 3 bandits have surrounded her, and she warns them to take a message back to their boss. Stop digging through the dead and stay underground. The bandits mock her, and one says she'll understand once they strip her. The woman doesn't flinch. She accepts their challenge and warns them that once it starts, everyone will be coming up. Ryu charges in without waiting. One of the bandits demands to know who they are. Another realizes nobody warned her she had backup. He steps forward and calls them thieves. The bandits recognize him as Volterra, then run off, yelling for him to wait his turn. The woman quickly puts her clothes back on and acts delicate again, then asks who they are. Ryu tells Kivye not to go overboard, but she says this is her business. Then a wrecker shows up, and the scene cuts to another place. After regrouping somewhere very normal looking, they all sit down to eat. The Fear says it's been a long time since she got to stop and have a meal like this. Oedipus asks if this place isn't too expensive. The woman says it's nothing, just her way of thanking the hunters who saved her life. As the owner of the Oasis Tavern, she says she always repays people who help her. Ryu asks if she's really the tavern owner, and she tells him not to sound so shocked. Robber explains that Newman is a businesswoman who runs taverns and hotels used in record deals. That's why bandits target her so often, like what just happened. Kivye seems tense and tells Wrecker not to act like he was the victim. She adds that this should really be reported to the guards, but Newman says this city doesn't work that way. There's no real law here, and there isn't even a hunters guild to manage the area. Everyone is on their own, so people like her have to build ties with strong hunters. Even if it's for personal reasons, she says that while giving Ryu a look, he just stares back, caught off guard until Kivye slams her glass onto the table and suddenly stands up. She calls this a waste of time, but she's obviously drunk. The protagonist asks where she thinks she's going, and she says to the dungeon. He can keep playing dumb if he wants, but she's going to find the boy herself so the mission doesn't get delayed. Newman hears all of that. Ryu points out she has no idea how huge the dungeon is, and she'll just get lost. Kivye says fine, and she'll get a map. Newman says she has a map that can point them to where Barolt is. MC-80s and a fur are all stunned. Kivye meanwhile has already finished packing up. Newman simply watches. The next day, they learn that to support record business, records were gathered on everything tied to the city. It's not perfect since it relies on reports and eyewitnesses, but it should help narrow down the places Barolt might be. She also lends them an artifact that can warn them if any of their companions are in danger. After all, she says people should help each other. 80s admits they got information much easier than expected, not to mention shelter and free meals. A fur happily adds that the food was amazing. Ryu points out their leaders still can't even stand up. Then he starts teasing Kivye, repeating how she kept saying she was going into the dungeon. She snaps at him to shut up and forget all of it, and the two keep bickering inside. Then the view shifts to one of the city's towers, where Wrecker and Newman are standing. He says the hunters have likely entered the maze already. The spots she marked on the map are places the Wreckers never reached, and Newman says she knows. What bothers her is not knowing where those people got information about Barolt. That's the part she can't figure out. Back in the dungeon, another fight ends fast. A level 72 drone appears, but against Ryu, that's nothing. He wipes them all out and even finishes with a smug pose. He says this is getting tricky since a huge group of monsters is chasing them. Kivye yells that kind of tricky is an understatement, it's his fault for making so much noise. Most of the monsters are still alive too. Ryu says that was on purpose. Since the monsters grew stronger because of the floor they're on, this works out fine. After all, there aren't any hunters down here. Kivye asks what that has to do with anything. Then they notice the fire behind them. They start taking in the experience points. All that energy gets absorbed, and just look at Ifra's Hades now. He's gotten a lot bigger than before. Hades says his level is still a little low, so when no hunters are around, Ryu uses fight